Hi everyone, today is December 31st, 2022, and Happy New Year in advance. Today is a special presentation and is the follow-up or part 2 of the analysis that I released on December 27th, that is 4 days ago. This presentation in part 1 essentially was doing an analysis of a very special contact experience that a good friend of mine, Linda A-Roraha, experienced back in 2016. And she was generous enough to share her footage and made a request for me to do an analysis to see if there was information contained in that experience or that footage. And so without wasting any time, so let's dig into it. The first thing I would like to do, obviously, is to show this footage again one more time, and then I will show the new development or the new findings that were realized over the last couple of days. So let me go ahead here and play this part or this footage, which is right here. And okay, so again, this is not going to last very long, but I'm going to repeat it twice, and please pay attention to the different geometrical shapes that are produced in that footage. We're going to talk about it, and also pay attention also when the objects are stretching and going back or collapsing back, because there's information contained in that. So here we go. And again, this is a footage by Linda A-Roraha. Here we go. So we see here different geometrical shape being produced. All right, let me play that one more time. So stretch, collapsing back. And then the objects reorganize to produce geometrical shapes. Okay, so I think we got the essential here of what is relevant for this presentation. So let's move on. So again, there's some screenshot here at the bottom. We can see some different frames. I did a frame-by-frame analysis of the footage. And again, thank you to Linda for her generosity. These are very personal experience, and I ask the audience to look at it that way and respect that. This footage are not just there to be consumed for entertainment. They are very important, and there's information contained in these interactions with the non-human intelligence. So this is one of the screenshots, and this I presented in part number 1. I'm not going to repeat everything, obviously. So I invite you to go to my YouTube channel and look at the first release, December 27th. And we saw in this V-shaped formation here that the angle at which these objects essentially arrange themselves to produce this beautiful V-shape were at an angle of 144 degrees. And 144 is a very, very important harmonic. As I went through in my past presentations, it is actually the fundamental harmonic of light. Very, very important harmonic. We'll talk about it a little bit further. So this is what came out of the initial analysis, but there's new development. So here are the new developments. So we see here a different screenshot of a formation that's very unique. And when we look at it closely, we see that this formation, when we rotate in a proper position, so we can look at it in straight, produce really a tetrahedron with an inscribed sphere in it. And let me move my picture a little bit here so I can show you what I'm talking about here. So you see here the tetrahedron that's produced very clearly, and there's a sphere, or there's an object in the middle which represents the inscribed sphere. And you see here on the upper right side a representation of a diagram or a harmonic simulation that I've been working on for several months, and this matches exactly that shape, tetrahedron with an inscribed sphere. It's important to precise here that what does this essentially represent in terms of harmonics? So a tetrahedron really resonates with harmonic 432. If you look at the bottom right here, the sum of the angles of the tetrahedron adds up to 720 degrees. And multiply by 60 minutes of arc per degree, so we end up with a harmonic equivalent of 43,200, which is equivalent to harmonic 432. As you know, in harmonic mathematics, we can slide the decimal left or right. And so essentially this, or the sum of the angle of a tetrahedron adds up, or corresponds to harmonic 432. And so this is really, really important, because if I go to the next slide, so we see here that, let me move my picture back. So to the left side, we see a representation of the flower of life, the 2D. It's a two-dimensional structure as we know it. But this two-dimensional structure of the flower of life, from which we can recreate all the Platonic solids, all the geometrical forms, essentially is the product of the 64 tetrahedron grid. And the 64 tetrahedron grid is really the 3D or three-dimensional structure that creates the flower of lives. And each of these tetrahedron that we see is essentially a small engine of this light energy that's that's being pumped into our reality, if you will, for lack of a better word. And so this is what we see here. So these tetrahedron are really, really important. And that, as we saw, is contained in this V-shape sighting and manifestation. To the right, we see, again, a harmonic simulation that I produced, and essentially, which means here that if we charge and we fill this tetrahedron with a volume of energy equivalent to the reciprocal of the golden ratio, and I'm going to explain what that means here. So the golden ratio, if it takes the number 1 here, the number 1 represents the totality of everything that can exist, right? Holographic universe. That's the oneness, the one, everything. If we divide and create a division of this oneness and we fractalize it, through the golden ratio, then the volume inside this tetrahedron, inside the inscribed sphere, will be equivalent to harmonic 432 squared, which is amazing in itself. And the volume, the residual volume outside the sphere, will be equivalent to harmonic 432. So when we ask ourselves, why is this harmonic so important? Well, it is because, in my opinion, and based on my research, because of this very fact, because these engine of light, these small tetrahedrons, which are essentially the engine and driving force in the holographic universe, once we create a division and fractalize through the golden ratio, we have this light energy, this volume of light energy that's inside the tetrahedron in the proportions that is described here. And if you look at it, interestingly, the 432 square is equivalent also to 186,624, which happens to be the speed of light in miles per second. That's very high accuracy. And we see actually these harmonics are encoded everywhere on our planet in ancient sacred sites. We see it, it's encoded here in the Great Pyramid of Giza, for instance. If you look at the hypotenuse of the Great Pyramid, is in meter, in the metric system, is exactly equivalent to 186.6 meter, or 432 squared in terms of harmonics. The match is 100%. So these numbers are encoded all over the place. And we see, by the way, to the right side, bottom right, that initially the Great Pyramid of Giza was covered with 144,000 casing stones of perfectly polished limestone. Again, this harmonic 144 that comes again in the picture. Talking about a pyramid, again, even the location of the pyramid on our planet is based on this harmonic. If you look here, for instance, the distance between the prime meridian, which is here, and the longitude where the Great Pyramid is actually located, the distance, the harmonic distance in terms of harmonic is exactly equivalent to 1,868 nautical miles, which is, again, this harmonic 432 squared at very high accuracy, well above 99.9% accuracy. Interestingly, this information is also encoded in UFO and UAP manifestations. If we look here physically where the Rendlesham UFO, the Rendlesham craft, for those who followed this Rendlesham Enigma, Rendlesham Forest Enigma, the craft landed. If we look at the location and we calculate the harmonic distance again between that craft and the Great Pyramid, the distance is exactly 1,864 nautical miles, which is again the same harmonic 432 squared. So these are no accident, really. There's no accident, and we see here again the representation in the within the tetrahedron. All right, so here's so essentially so far we've covered that this sighting, this V-shaped sighting, encoded essentially harmonic 144 through the angle of the V-shape. We've just demonstrated that one of the shape that was produced by these objects or these crafts was the tetrahedron with the inscribed the sphere, which represents harmonic 432. And the last ingredients here that of interest that I want to present is that if we look here at the V-shape when it's stretched, right, and 2 seconds later, how it's essentially collapsed, there's, you know, all these objects shrinks, if you will. Well, this, amazingly, when we look and we do the analysis of this, let me move my picture a bit here. So when we do the analysis of this and we calculate the relative distance, if you will, relative length of this segment, the V-shaped stretch versus the V-shaped shrunk configuration, and we look at the proportion, we realize that the proportion is exactly equivalent to the golden ratio squared at very high accuracy, which is really fascinating. I was really stunned when I saw the results of that, but I had the feeling and the intuition that this craft, or these objects that were stretching and collapsing back on their original configuration, that this didn't happen by accident. There had to be a purpose for this, because there's a purpose in everything that the non-human intelligence is doing. It's just for us to be able to recognize the messages, hidden or behind the sightings themselves. And why is the golden ratio important? Obviously, the golden ratio is the key principle driving fractality in our universe. You know, how things essentially grow, from the growth of plants, from the pine cone, from the Nautilus shell to even the proportion of our body are based on the golden ratio. The golden ratio is equivalent to 1.618. And we see in the proportion of our body, it's encoded everywhere. Even in how the dynamic of hurricanes, vortex is produced, how galaxies also are produced, and how they essentially evolve. So this is quite remarkable. Golden ratio is the key mathematical or driving force in the universe that drives fractality and growth. So what we end up with here is quite an amazing picture where the three key harmonics, or the three key ingredients in creation, are encoded in this sighting. We see on the left, again, we talked about the V shape, which was at 144 degrees. In the middle, we see how the proportion of the V shape collapsed versus a stretch configuration is equivalent to the golden ratio squared, which reveals the golden ratio. On the right side, we see, as discussed earlier, that the sightings also contained the harmonic 432 through the tetrahedron with inscribed sphere. And this all match, for those who've been following my work, and I encourage to look at my past interviews with Grant Cameron, also on Leak Project and other platforms, where I introduced this equation, this universal formula for the light encoded reality matrix, which I call. which represents essentially the equation that drives a holographic universe. And we see here at the bottom, so the one represents the totality of everything, the oneness of the holographic universe itself. And in the consciousness field, essentially, is this one aspect. And on the right side are these harmonics, 144, 432, and the golden ratio, from which these harmonics of lights from these three ingredients, we can recreate the totality of our physical reality, of what we perceive as our physical reality. We see here that these harmonics, or these numbers, these harmonics are in perfect resonance with many aspects in nature. We see the brain waves, from the brain wave to the Schumann resonance, resonates with the reciprocal of harmonic 144, even the water molecule. We talked about the golden ratio, which drives fractality, universe, harmonic 432, which, we see so many things related to that. And again, I've presented that. I won't go through all of this in detail right now, but essentially, as mentioned, we can recreate the totality, the entirety of our physical reality and perception, through these harmonics of light, because we are made of light. We are light beings ourselves. And the number 1 to the left is very important, because this represents the holographic universe, or the oneness, which connects to the consciousness field. These numbers and harmonics are also encoded, embedded, as we see in our biology and DNA. We see here that, to the left, the cell division, they divide, in golden ratio proportions. We have a DNA cross-section here on the right side, and we see that it's made of a decagon with angles 144 degrees. There are 10 sides with, 10 angles of 144 degrees. And this DNA cross-section is surrounded by 10 pentagons, which themselves have angles of 108 degrees, but you multiply by 4 and you get 432 again. And if you look even at the proportion of these dimensions here, like the segment A divided by segment B is also golden ratio proportion. So as we can see, these harmonics and golden ratio are embedded everywhere in the universe, in our DNA, in the water molecules, resonates with our brain waves, the Schumann resonance, and so on. Again, I've presented this in detail in past presentations. So I'm just doing a very quick overview or recap right now. And why is this important? Well, this knowledge here, and let me move my picture a little bit here, this knowledge of how the universe really operates and functions is key to, as the capability for us to develop technologies that has the capability of, I believe, to free humanity of its current limitations and dependencies, right? From knowing how this thing works, how the universe really operates through these harmonics in the consciousness field, essentially will allow us to develop healing technologies, develop interstellar communication and travel, space travel, telepathy. As I said, the harmonic 144 resonates with our brain waves and the Schumann resonance directly. It's mathematically demonstrable, which I've done. Develop anti-gravity and free energy and so on. So these are really the building block of creation. And that's why the non-human intelligence have been communicating the keys of the universe to us throughout history through sightings and other manifestations. And I've given many examples of that in the past presentation as well. We looked today, obviously, about the V-shaped sighting, but for those who recall, I presented like the golden ratio triangular craft, which manifested itself on 4 different occasions here. And I have done the analysis, and the analysis reveals, again, the same harmonics and golden ratio portion, and so on. So we need to pay attention to that. I think this is a new field of study that I'm proposing here in terms of analyzing the information contained in these sightings. And so, again, I want to thank Linda for having, being willing to share this beautiful and beautiful experience, very personal experience with us, which allows us to, develop new knowledge. And I think we're embarking on a very amazing journey. And so thanks everyone for your attention. And again, Happy New Year, be well, and we'll talk soon.